Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible.
Hello and welcome everyone back to the Life and Happiness Podcast run by the GSMC Podcast Network. So I'm recording this on Monday, so it's going to be Tuesday. So happy Tuesday, you all. I hope it's been going well. Let's see, as for me, how did my week go? Well, it's been fun scripting out these ideas for all of you, but all other things that I've got, school and, well, the other work that I have, which, how would I describe that? Sales work is an interesting field. I'd want to put this kind of story because, well, if you think about sales, it's not... What image comes to your mind? It's not the best kind of image. There's a snake oil salesman. He's just going to sell me something that doesn't work. Or it's the used car salesman. He's just going to say some quick words and get me to get a car, which... How would I put it? Explodes for one thing, or will last me 5 minutes just so I get out the lot, and then it's not going to work, and because of the contract I won't be able to get it back. It's things like that, that this kind of line of work is something that people look at. Oh, you're just coming for my money, and well, to be honest, there are some of those who actually act that way, and I think those people are morally reprehensible. But when you think about it, sales is like part of everything that you do. Think about it for dating. If you want someone to go out with you, you got to sell yourself to them. You got to, these are the reasons you should choose me instead of everyone else. Think about that for, podcasts. I have to make my podcast interesting and compelling in a way that you choose to put your time to listen to me instead of any of the countless other videos out there. Or getting a job, you're selling yourself to an employer. And when you think about it, it's the ones which don't make you feel like they're just trying to come after your money. That they're genuinely providing a service to you, which is a benefit to your life, and that they want to help you. That's when you're willing to kind of, help them out. But, it still gets a bad rap. It's been looked at like a dirty word. So, We'll touch on some issues related to that. But today's theme, the big idea that we're going to be handling, is the idea of change. Because, well, I'm sure things go around all the time. Like, the details shift. And, some people will question whether the main principles should be challenged too. But no matter what, things never stay static. Things never stay in the same place. So we're going to go over all the different ways change affects us in our life. And the final one will be top 7 things to look out for, so you can embrace change, so you don't collapse under the flow. It's going to basically the top 7 ways to handle the flood, because the flood is life. The flood is all the different things which you don't expect, all the details which you may be unprepared for. So put in the comments below, what are you most afraid of in change? What things would you want to stay the same? And can change is all change a good thing? I'm curious what you guys' thoughts on that. So, big reason why I want to focus on this kind of topic today is I've been reading Beyond Order by Jordan B Peterson. And a major theme of the whole book is too much order. And what that kind of means is things like to get into routines. Naturally. Things like to get into a place where they're set in stone and they don't change, that they stay rigid. Think about it, like if you get used to your same schedule, like same daily life kind of thing, you stop thinking about necessarily the details because it becomes habit, becomes second nature. But there are issues with that kind of habit, because life is full of chaos, and chaos, what that represents is the unexpected. All the little things which could make something go wrong. All the little things which you have no idea of saying. And think about it this way. Here's a great example. Think about when you're going to ask someone out on a date. All the different scenarios run through your mind. Every little thing which could go wrong, be it the details of how you look. Oh, what if I look messy? What if my shirt's too folded? What if my hair's not the right way? What if I don't smile correctly? What if I have a weird look in my eye? To, okay, what's the exact word I should use and how should I use it? Oh, how are different ways they should respond? What if they say this? Should I say that? And it's like there's limitless things which could happen. And all those things run through your mind. That's chaos. That's the unknown. That's the thing you don't really... It's just potential. That's the best way to describe it. And I think a lot of the time people are scared of that potential. People are scared of the things that we don't know if we can handle. It's because order, that represents essentially explored territory. That's what we know, what we have an answer to, what we have a solution in our minds, and everything else is chaos, the unknown, the things we could be able to handle. Maybe there's something useful. I guess, like, let me go back to that same scenario, asking someone out on a date. And what's going to happen, it's either, hey, I asked them out, I get rejected. I asked them out, we go on a date, and then it doesn't work out. Or I ask them out, we go on a date, and it works out well. Those are the three broad categories and describe most of the scenarios. I can't think of one that goes outside of it. The details, you can get bogged down on that. Imagine those people who go into what-if scenarios for different shows and all that. There are so many different ways you could go. Some that make sense, some that don't, but anything is possible. And that fear of the unknown is what can stop you. And so now let's remove it from that kind of context. And now let's think about it in a work kind of context. A good thing about businesses is they tend to try to make things as efficient as possible. In order to give you the best price they can, you have to iron out the kinks, iron out the things which make them spend more money than they have to, so they can provide a better service to their customers. And people get into habits which work really well for a specific period of time, Like, think about it. Actually, here's a good one that a good example from sports that I was told. So Colin Kaepernick, in his first, I think it was 2 years as a quarterback, he did really well. But as the league figured out how he played, his skills they just knew how to handle his tactics. And because he didn't change tactics, his success diminished after that. But it's not just that. It's like in baseball it happens too. A lot of times with rookie players, they'll come up and they just see everyone so well and they're hitting 300 right off the bat. But as the pitchers learn what he does, they change, they adapt themselves and start targeting his weaknesses. So if he doesn't change in kind, then he's not going to find the same success as before. So back to the business thing. If you have that system that's in place, that routine, but you don't prepare for the potential realities of what could happen in the future marketplace, what do your customers want? Those new scenarios, those new details that come out of nowhere can break the whole system. If there is no room for flexibility, it's just rigid, the whole thing can collapse and then everyone's out of a job. The potential for danger, the potential for loss is always there. That's the big reason why things always fall apart. I guess the broadest way you could put this is no matter what you create, no matter what you have, if you do nothing to it, it doesn't stay static. It gets worse. It becomes more corrupted. And maybe it's because of stuff internally, or maybe it's because something outside damages it. But it starts to fade. It starts to weaken, then it'll start to fade, and then it'll disappear. Think about it. Like, build a statue out in the middle of a desert where there's lots of winds, or just anywhere, and then let no one take care of it. And I'm sure you guys have seen photos on the internet of human things that we've built up and have all collapsed. Everything falls apart if no one works on it to renew it for the new age. Everything eventually disappears. And it's true for most things. Like, most business ideas fail. Most species that have lived on the earth, I think it's 99.9%, have gone extinct. And that's because, well, failure is the natural state of things. Chaos, destruction is the natural state of things. Anything which is, like, ordered in any way, anything which is, that works, is extremely rare. And I don't think we understand how rare that is. So, for context, I think most people realize that the average person around you isn't out to hurt you or do anything to you in such a way. For the most part, going outside is kind of safe, at least here in the United States and in a lot of the developed countries of the world. And that's not true. Like, my family comes from Guatemala, and it's definitely not true there. One of the stories that I have is one of my first times going down there when I was little. My dad told me, "Don't speak English; they will rob you." And it's not necessarily for a reason of being evil, or those people being evil or anything like that. It's because, well, things are so bad there that a lot of people, when they realize someone's a foreigner, that means they'll have money. And that money is what they can use to support their own families. When you push people to the edge, there's a lot of things people are willing to do. So, peace is not the norm. And that's a weird thing to kind of understand. It's because you can be born, a lot of us who are like my generation, born in the 90s, we haven't dealt with any major crisis, which, other than potentially COVID, which makes it so that the norms that we've dealt with, that we think those are how the real world actually works. But no, that peace is the rare thing. If you look at many, like, Chinese history, the history of the Native Americans, or Europe, or anywhere in the world, majority of the time, war is a dominant kind of thing, and one place becomes a part of one nation, and then becomes part of another. There's a famine. It's rare that mostly everyone can go into a store and just go get food like that, and at prices which, if you have a few bucks, you can go get food at the supermarket, or at the McDonald's, or anything like that. Like, things like that, those are ordered structures. And they constantly need to be kept up so that they don't fall apart. And it's good to understand that these institutions, as I call them, they have to be constantly updated. So but you can't radically change them, because there's something to that order which allowed it to work. If there's a structure that actually does exist, there needs to be a reason for it, because most things fail, like we said. And if something is holding on well, then you should think twice about wanting to tweak something dramatic about it. And you should try to understand how the system works, where it's working well. And here's the important part. So when change is necessary, when there's a problem, we need to figure out exactly what the issue is, so how we can then solve it. And all that is basically my preface to what the first idea is, which is, don't carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievements. What that is, don't carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievements. What that is, don't carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievements. What that is, don't carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievements. What that is, don't carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievements. What that is, don't carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievements. What that is, is that back and forth between, hey, we need to update the system, and hey, the system's actually pretty good. That there are reasons why it's been successful. Because you need both. You need the side which understands what about a system is keeping the structure intact, which is keeping the structure with the characteristics that it has. And then you need the people who come up with these new ideas, the creative types, who can who can see how we can not revolutionize, more like evolve the system in a way so that we can keep the good, but also handle the swath of new issues which are coming forth. Because chaos is something you can't predict. And as the details come in, we need to hold down the fort, or else the fort's going to fall apart. And I will get more into these ideas into the next segment. But keep in mind, for the fourth segment, 7 ways to stand against a flood. But when we come back, we'll get more into why you shouldn't carelessly denigrate social institutions, and also why you should be praising creative achievements. Don't belittle that. All right, we'll be back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the Life and Happiness Podcast, second segment on our Happy Tuesday. How are you guys all doing? We ended that last segment on a discussion of essentially change. Because, things fall apart. That's the rule. Everything, if you leave it static, will eventually fall down. And that comes to actually everything, including yourself. We've come up with this idea before, where if you're not growing as a person, you're going backwards. It's like that one idea in Alice in Wonderland. In this world, you have to be going full speed just to stay in the same place. And it's a sad truth of the world. If you build a structure, if you don't clean it, if you don't take care of it, it's going to fall apart. Insides first, and then it's going to be the outsides with erosion, and eventually you won't have a building. Same with a fence post, same with anything you can create. Same with an idea. If you create an idea and you don't see all the different ways that it could fall apart, it's going to fall apart to those things which come up. You have to be ready for that kind of change. And all of this I want to talk about because I've been reading Jordan B Peterson's new book, Beyond Order. And we're going to get into, in this segment, his first chapter, which is don't carelessly denigrate social institutions. And also, don't forget to encourage those creative achievements. And so we're going to get into how he really explores this kind of idea. Because you'll have two sides dominating within a society. And you can generally split along these two sides. Of course, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be talking generalizations. So, society, just like any other thing, is something which can fall apart, or the structure become too rigid. And then so, the structure needs to be updated as the details change, as time goes forward. And it's the creative types which they're the ones who come up with the new ideas, who see things that the average person wouldn't see. It comes up with the new scenario, the new solution, which actually can solve the problems. And they express the creative types are constantly kind of that's their thing. If you're not creating something new, they also kind of start to wither away and fall apart. And those people are important. They're the ones that see into chaos, see into the potential, and bring it into reality. But then you also need the other side, which understands the system and how it works, and what part of the systems are good and how they should be kept that way. These are generally the more conservative types, but it's not because there is a correlation to conservatives for this group. I'm blanking on the exact word to describe these types. Is the more conscientious. That's the one. Because all this is based on Jordan B Peterson's understanding of the different types of people through his background in years and as a psychiatrist doing his practice. And so I'll be referencing these ideas and what they mean for. So the more creative side leans to be more liberal side, and the other side tends to lean more conservative, the conscientious types. And you have these two sides in tension, because one side tends to see problems with the structure itself, with the hierarchy of values, because in any society, with any structure which is built, which supports a society, there's always going to be the person on top, the person on the bottom. So the danger is, sometimes if you don't change, if you don't address the needs, the whole structure becomes corrupted, and then it's really hard for the people to move up in society, and the people who at the very top hold all the power. Think about that. Just think about Nazi Germany. That's a clear example, but others would just be like monarchies in the past, emperors, where all the power was in one thing and hardly anyone could move up, and mostly everyone suffered. That's the danger of too much order. And then the other side is, if you collapse the whole structure, you don't get peace, you get destruction. No one knows what to do if there's no hierarchy of values, and if there's nowhere to go, well, what are you going to do? You just get people, it's anarchy. That's that extreme. So they both fall apart at their extremes. So what you get in every society is a tension, a proper tension between the conservative type people who understand the structure and what needs to be kept in the structure, but then the liberal type people who see how it needs to be updated and actually can implement those changes in. So you have a structure which is staying stable, but also is flexible enough so that people at the bottom can move up. And all that is a backdrop for essentially the title of the chapter. Because do not carelessly denigrate social institutions, and also make sure to celebrate his creative achievements. And it's a warning on both sides to their own tendencies. Whereas the conservative types, they need to be more open to the new. Because, think about it. What holds you back from taking that opportunity or that choice? It's all the scenarios you can't predict. It's like, going back to the first thing I mentioned, is asking a girl on the date. You don't know what's going to happen. And you know what? It could go bad. You could get hurt really bad. Or you could be made fun of or embarrassed. Something like that. And you don't know what to expect. And we like to stay in the domain of all the things that happen to us are the things that we do expect. Because we're comfortable there. It's safe. But then nothing new happens. Because like I said in the beginning, if you take that opportunity, who knows where it will lead you? And it could lead you to an amazing place. Like, what if you took that one chance and that girl was the one you ended up marrying and being with her for 60 years and having that big family? Or what if taking that job opportunity is what builds you that career and takes you all the places you want to go? What if applying to that college actually gets you an acceptance? So, So now it is going to that creative achievement. Let's take it back to what that means in regards to society. Is that the creative types represent the new, represent the places where society could go, the potential futures. And some of them are good. Some of them are good ideas. And, well, essentially it's a warning to those types who tend to keep things more static, to be more open and don't just ridicule the creative types as having no value, not contributing to things, because they do. And they also could be the source of what actually saves the system, which is very true, because as we started with before, things always change, so you always need the people who can see the unexpected, who can bring forth what that's new. And now back to the liberal types, the creative types, versus, because we just finished discussing the conscientious types, the conservative types. They're the one where the do not carelessly denigrate social institutions is aimed at. For the reason being, there's lots of talk of those kinds of things. If you pay attention to the culture, I don't want to mention them here, but many ideas which were considered normal are now considered evil. Actually, the biggest one you think of, and probably the most egregious, is, well, Dr. Seuss. Well, apparently in the news, some people don't want Dr. Seuss to be talked about. Well, certain books. And I don't know about you, but growing up, I read all his books, and nothing about it seemed wrong to me. But it's more so that it's a relic of the past that means it should be dispensed with. It's almost as if this notion that, well, because it's in the past, it was meeting standards which we don't have at the time, which we don't have now. Now our standards are better, so we should just disregard them because there's no actual use for them there. There's no use for that knowledge of the past. It's only the new, which is good. Which there's lots of problems with that. Because one, that comes with the assumption that all change is good. And I don't know about you, but I kind of disagree with that. I think that change can be good, but I also think the more accurate way to look at it is change is inevitable. That you always have to be prepared for change, for the flood. But not all change is progress, and not all change is a good thing. For example, this is just to show the logic, it's an extreme example, of course, of why saying that all change is good is a good thing, is, okay, what if we change it so instead of greeting people with a handshake, you just stab them with a knife? And I know that seems absurd, but that's a change. Does that mean that change is a good thing? And it's not saying not me recommending that. The point is saying, if you're going to hold to the idea that all change is good, well, there's some things which fall under that principle which are pretty bad, and therefore defeat the principle. It means that principle is absurd. It doesn't make sense. So the not carelessly denigrating social institutions is a warning to them to not just look at the past as something, oh, it's antiquated. There's no knowledge there which applies to me. Versus the more conscientious types, more conservative types, they see the past and like, this is the knowledge we must stick to. And their issues, we must only stick to that. Because both of those extremes are wrong. Yes, the right way to go about it is there is knowledge enough of the past, which applies to me now. And a big reason of that is because we're all human. The people in the past did those things. We're human just the way I am. And if they make mistakes, I might make those same mistakes too. So I want to understand why they made those mistakes, how they made those mistakes, so I don't do that now. That's the whole reason why we study history. We study history to get the story of humanity. What did people do? Why did they do them? Why would we do them? If we were in those same scenarios, why did we make those choices? History is our story. Literally our story. And it's important to understand it and to see it for the truth of what it is. Because there is a truth to it. But you can't just stick to that, because there's also everything we don't know. Just think of, so if you consider the scenario put of asking someone out, now consider not just that, but every potential thing which could happen from now till the day the universe ends in some either big crush or I forget the name of the other one. Something about cooling, where all the energy in the world just becomes and the universe just becomes too dissipated. I forget which one's which. I forget the name of that one. My bad. But don't you see the complexity in trying to figure something out like that? I don't think any system, as it is, will ever be able to handle every single thing which could happen. There's always going to be a crack it will find. So, you need the people who are seeing them as they come, and then can figure out how we can then implement some changes to keep our system intact, to keep it working well for everyone. But we also need to understand its structure, why the structure works, so we don't mess with the things which actually will make it all fall apart. Because that's not a good thing either. And ultimately, think about that. I think the biggest message for both of these is a little bit of humility. I think the core message is we can always be wrong. You, me, anything. And what that takes is being able to accept that you could always learn something from someone else. That they could point you closer to the right direction. I don't have everything figured out. And you don't have everything figured out. But by me speaking with you, and specifically in this podcast experience, me speaking to all of you out there, I could maybe figure out something closer to the truth and head in that right direction. Alright, so now this is the second segment wrapping up. We're going to go continue on to these themes in the next segment. And don't forget, at the final one, we're going to be talking about the 7 best ways to handle the flood. And we'll see you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the Life and Happiness Podcast, powered by the GSMC Podcast Network. And hello, everyone. Welcome to segment 3 of today's episode. The last 2 segments, we went over change itself. And then we went into the last segment, what that means in regards to society. And how, well, society also falls apart if it's not updated. And how you need a constant balance of the people who understand the past, understand why something works, to keep that integrated in the system, while also having the people who are more creative-minded and can figure out the new solutions for all the specific details of the day, so that the society is minimally corrupted. Because also, it's accept there's always going to be corruption. There's always going to be something wrong with the system, because nothing's perfect. And what all that comes to, what this segment's going to be about, is essentially humility. Humility is one of the greatest things to incorporate into yourself. As you know what? There's issues on both sides there's the older people saying there's nothing new, there's nothing good that we can learn from the younger kids. But there's also the idiocy of the younger generation to say there's nothing to learn from the older generation. There's Dennis Prager put it a great way, and that he used to hear this when he was going through college back in the 60s, and that don't trust anyone over 30. And I was like, oof. Because, in my experience of it. Because I also didn't trust many grown-ups when I was little. For the main reason that, it didn't seem like they were telling me things that were true or real, or things that actually made sense. But maybe that's my specific experience. But I do know I went wrong in extending that in general to adults. Because what I've realized is how much wisdom there actually is in the real teachings of the past. Because I think for wisdom specifically, how I would describe that as actual understanding of how life works. The closest thing to the truth about life. And you know what? Age kind of has nothing to do with telling you that. Because you can have a baby has no wisdom, a 5-year-old has no wisdom. But you can also have an 85-year-old with no wisdom. You can have an 85-year-old child. And that's also a sad truth. That doesn't mean every single one is that way. That doesn't mean every single child has no wisdom. And that means you need to look at everything with this kind of, with this wonder, the wonder that a child would look at something. When you want to understand something, and it's almost this respect you give it, that, you know what, I could be wrong. I may be lacking somewhere. And you know what? You may have the piece which actually completes me. You may have something to offer. And to give someone that kind of earnest look. And that you can't do that if you're not willing to be coachable. If you're not willing to address that, your system's not perfect. That there are holes in it. And even if there weren't holes for a period of time, there might be holes in it now because things change. That's a big part of life. And you won't be able to get that if you're not humble. Or if not trying to be humble. And it's a thing too working. Because you know what? You know what's another thing about people? We don't like to be wrong. We don't like it when someone points out that, hey, you know what, you're screwing up, you're doing something which it's making everything worse. Because, another thing, we don't like to accept our own failures. It's hard to look at those issues because that means something is wrong with us. And that's why when someone's not ready or not willing to face it, they get angry. And I'm sure you've seen it, where you point something out to someone, and they get upset about it. And the only reason why people get upset about it is because they know it's true. This is going back to what we talked about in the last episode. The truth is the thing which is the most stable. And insults or whatever, compliments, anything, really only hold true to someone if you accept that they're true in some way, in implicit or non-implicit. That's the only way all that works. So, in being humble, in being willing to accept that you're not all that you could be, then the pain that you get when someone points out the flaw, when someone points out the change when needs to be made, you won't be as upset about it. And you know what? Maybe you're willing to incorporate it. Maybe you're willing to become all that much better for it. Who knows? It's just up to you to try. And I think that'd be a good thing. Oh my God. Well, I think for me, one of the best changes I've been able to implement is both getting specifically my parents to talk more with me in a way where it feels like they respect what I think and respect that I have some ideas I think are good and willing to bring to the table that I've thought through. It's not that I know nothing, but also that I've been willing to look at them more in a way where, yes, there is something good to be there, something to be learned, and that they're deserving of that kind of respect. And since then, since I've implemented that change, it's made both my relationship with my mother and father all that much better. And, well, I think where I learned how much of an impact that is, essentially is working with, trying to get the most out of other people. What people love to do is talk about themselves. If you really want to get to know someone, you just get them started on something they like. And listen attentively. Remember what they say. And then hopefully they remember what you say too. It's good when you have that back and forth with someone. When you can have that sustained conversation of things you both enjoy, but also you challenge one another. One person points out the issues which you have. Not necessarily in a mean way, but because of your interaction with them, you're more aware of them. And then you can fix it and become better. And they help you celebrate that. And then the other person does the same. You do the same for the other person. And it's like that back and forth, which makes that friendship fun. It's exciting and worth keeping. And honestly, that's one of the things you should look for in a life partner. That the person who completes you, the person who brings that best out of you. And also, you're both interacting with the truth of one another. You're both looking at all of that person, their flaws, their weaknesses, their strengths and talents, and understanding the past which forms who they are, and encouraging them to make those small little adjustments, taking that, suck up that little bit of pride which is preventing you, and make that effort to become the person who you could be. And all that stems from that one idea, humility. What's the reason for that? And then, here's the side effect of humility. It makes life a little bit easier. Life in the way that you're not frustrated nearly as much by the inadequacies of your situation. In that, things aren't going to be perfect. Things aren't going to be exactly how they want to be. But you also know that you can make it better. By accepting your flaws, you can then understand how you can improve a situation. And then maybe with that humility, in understanding the flaws, you can also understand the gifts, the blessings which are there. And that brings in gratitude. That whole theme that we've been talking about for everything. That circles back in here too. And all this interacts with that change that we've been discussing. So it's, no matter what you are, no matter what it is you've created, no matter what it is that has been created, everything falls apart. No matter what it is, it will all fall apart. Unless you actively work towards it. You have to be growing. You have to be improving. Whenever the new situation comes in, you have to fit the structure to the issues of the time. But you also can't just destroy the structure, because if you have a structure in the first place that works at all, that's rare. And if you keep the good in that structure as you move on to the next steps, just think about have you ever seen those models of machine learning where they teach a little polygonal thing how to walk? The only way it grows, the only way it gets to success is by measuring things in depth. It's it makes an attempt, and the attempt fails for this amount of time, that thing dies. And it creates new ones based on that original attempt with the things which are working. And then it tries it on the new ones. And you know what? Most of those fail. And then it takes the best of what it learned from those new attempts, which also includes the best from the past attempts, to then, you know what, here's the next set of attempts. And it keeps going and going until eventually it has something that succeeds for a long period of time. And you know what? Then that new thing just needs to keep being updated. Because you know what? Just starting to succeed isn't enough. What more could you do? How much better could you get? And it's a constant learning growth, which, if we bring it back to the other ideas from the other podcasts, that is essentially what the path of meaning is. When you understand yourself, when you understand your pieces, and then you see where you could be, and you aim for that. When you look at the highest you could go, and you know what? You work honestly towards it. You accept that you're going to fail. You accept that things aren't going to go well. But it's the fact that you're moving upwards, that you're growing, that you're taking on that responsibility, which will bring that byproduct of meaning and then happiness, which is something we all want, isn't it? Like, I think everyone would want to be happy and get rid of the resentment which occupies all our lives. Because every single one of us, we have things that, you know, make us feel bad. And some of us have way more than the rest of us, sadly. I think for a final bit on this last segment, before we get into how to handle the flood, that humility lets you treat people better. That ease, because an understanding that, you know what, maybe you're not suffering the worst. You know, you have issues, but everyone else has issues too. That, you know what, maybe this person who I'm talking to, no matter what they look like, has it worse than I do. Because you know what, some people do. And that's irrespective of what their financial or background situation is. Like, some people can have really bad lives and you have no idea why they're suffering so much. So what right do you have to just lay down all your emotions on them and make their day worse? I think, you know what, I think it would make you smile more. I think it would make your day better if you just treated people with courtesy and respected one another. So that, you know what, maybe my little effort that I put there made that guy's day, made that person smile. And you know what? Him smiling made me smile. And it's that one little distraction from all the pain that we go through all the time. All the rigors of work, all the rigors of relationships, friend, family, or life partner, whatever it is. Because life is hard, you know? And we deal with it every single day. And we need that reason to keep going all the time. The reason we get up, the reason we look ourselves in the mirror and keep that smile on our face. Because you know what? That's the aim. That's what the aim should be. How to make all this pain worth it. And on that path is, you decide what would make it worth it. Honestly decide that. And if you're willing to put in the effort to deal with change, to humble yourself before what needs to be done, I think every single one of you can do it. And that's what I'm trying to do. And you know what? I still got my flaws to overcome. The things which hold me back. And you know what? Sometimes my mood doesn't want me to do things. But in the end, I think it's worth it. And I've felt that it's worth it. So I'm keep aiming at that, and I hope you all do. Hope you all do too. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. This segment 3, is about to come to a close. Next segment is 7 ways to handle the flood, and we will be back.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the Life and Happiness Podcast, run by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, it's thank you to all those people at the GSMC Podcast Network for allowing this kind of opportunity to happen. I'm grateful for that every day and for this opportunity. All today, we've been talking about change. We've been talking about humility and Jordan Peterson's new chapter from his new book, Beyond Order, which has to do with the importance of our social institutions and the people who create the new ideas which allow those institutions to succeed for all the new details in every new age. And now we come to our final segment, 7 ways to handle the flood. And what do I mean by that? Like, what do I mean by a flood? Because what I'm referencing is the story of Noah's Ark. Because you could take the literal depiction of it, which is God chose Noah out of all these people to survive the flood. And the flood killed everyone except Noah and his family. And you know what? The story works on a literal interpretation. But I'm going to blow your minds with this one. And what if if you go one level deeper, is the story is about Noah, who is the type of man who can survive the flood, which if you look the exact Hebrew, I don't remember how to pronounce it, but what it means is more like chaos. That's what that kind of means. Like it's like an ocean. It's like the void of chaos. That's the best way to describe it. And because he's the type of man who was able to survive that and not only protect him, but his family, and ultimately preserve what the world would be. Whereas every other type of person, they weren't able to handle it and they died in the flood. So these are seven ideas, I think, which help build you into that type of person who could handle essentially the world going to hell. The world, some big, massive thing, which basically the unexpected chaos, which hits us harder than we might realize. Anyways, let's get into it. I think, number 1, don't sell yourself short. No, don't ever sell yourself short. As in, don't cut off your potential. You have no idea how much you could grow. But more of a bottom line, every single person knows what they could do in their day to make it a little bit better. Just the tiniest thing. Just, hey, it would be good if I just woke up and smiled to my wife every morning. You know what? That might make her day. Because you know what most mornings I do? I just get up, all frowning because I'm tired or whatever. I don't want to get up and I don't do anything. I'm just like all grumpy. But you know what? Make that day better? I start off with the happy attitude. Make her happy. Make her morning happy. Just look, that's just one example. One little thing. But ultimately, it's more like you have so much more to you that you could do. And you could do the thing. So do the smallest thing that you can do and are willing to do. Just little stuff like that. Try to keep that mentality of how can I make the situation I'm in right now better. And then it extends to you. And you will see how much further you could go. And then so that extends to this next one. Number 2, are you willing to learn? Always be willing to learn. Because as we discovered with all the change, you're not enough. You will never be enough. And you may think that's contrary to the first principle. But that's just a watch for arrogance. A watch for, like you've seen it plenty of times in movies, where the villain, they are so close. They think they have everything settled. But because they're not perfect, they always make mistakes. The hero takes advantage of that, and they fall. And you see on their face disbelief because they had no idea that they could fall. And that's the thing we all got to watch out for. Because you know what? We get into routines. We get into things, the habits, which are hard to break. But you can break them. You can be better. And that means you have to be willing to accept the new, things where you might be wrong. So, that goes into this next idea. 3. You know what? Most things are wrong. Failure is the norm. Being, when it comes to the truth, there is only one thing that is right. And actually, everything else is wrong. So, how does that help us? Why is that important? I think the biggest reason is it almost it removes the pressure from doing everything. I'm going back to I like this example. Asking that girl out. You know what? You're going to ask out probably hundreds of girls or a few tens of girls before you find one that sticks. All right, and you know what? If you're just starting out, if you don't know how to do it, you're going to get rejected. You're going to get rejected a lot. And you know what? That's okay, because most of the time you're going to get rejected. I think sports is a great example. I was told by my coach back in high school, you know what? You're going to fail most of the time. So you just got to you can't let the failures get to you. You have to just keep your head in and get ready for the next at bat. And every time come up there fighting. And that's the thing you need to just keep in mind. How am I going to keep going despite every failure? What is it that I need to do that will let me let go of those feelings and get ready for every new opportunity? Because on the flip side of that, you have no idea what could happen at every opportunity. Most of them fail. That is correct. But this one might be the one that works. This swing, this pitch might be the home run. This girl might be the girl of my dreams. You have no idea. So why not try? You're already used to the failure. Now hit that home run. Okay. So now the next one. A good way to keep in mind. A good thing to keep in mind so that you can keep up with that failure, make sure it doesn't get to you, is number 4, which is remember the good. Always focus on what you're grateful for. Because you know what? Just like how in the first one we described that you can always imagine the better, you can always imagine the worse. I know to keep hammering this point on that, gratitude is one of the hardest things to keep. Because we don't notice the good. We forget it's there because it doesn't hurt us. It goes into it. It naturally wants to go into space that we don't we don't have to focus on what it is. We don't have to worry about it. But it's exactly that reason why we should keep it in mind and just give ourselves that ease how we have these things. Because we all do. Even if it's the minimal thing, like my grandfather tells me this story of when they moved here to this country for the first time. All he had was himself, my grandmother, and the clothes on their backs. And they slept in the bushes by LA City College in those first few nights. And you know what? They had that to be grateful for. I don't know if any of you are religious, but for them, another thing that they just use it as a reason to be thankful for God, to have this, because it's not just that they were there with the clothes on their backs and they had each other. They were also in a land of opportunity, which would give them more to grow and gave them the lives which would produce all the good that my father and my mother experienced, and also what I have. And I had to be constantly thankful for not only the good things directly in my life, but for the good fortune of my family. So, because it's their struggles which produce everything that I have. And it's makes everything else that much easier. And also is the motivation, understanding that they went through so much. I, at the very least, can give my all. Like if they went through hungry many nights and cold out in the middle out in those bushes in the middle of LA, I, at the very least, can work hard here in my cushy apartment with my blankets, with my nice clothes, and the opportunities which I've been given. I owe it at least that much effort because they gave everything they had when it was harder. Okay, that's that one. Next one. Seek the knowledge of those before you. Number 5. Because not only is it that we have to be willing to learn, you should go and look at the people who've done what you want to do before. And also, this is more of the willing to learn thing too. You have to be willing to do the same things that they did, or at least put the same amount of effort that they did. So here's one person I like to watch, Tim Pool. And what he does, he was a homeless kid at some point growing up. And he started with just a cell phone to go do reporting at different sites. He started at Occupy Wall Street, and he did so much after that. And he's grown into a successful journalist, independent journalist. And when he gets the questions all the time of, what do I need to do to be like you? And then he tells people what he did, of the sacrifices he made. He slept on couches all the time to save money so that he could have enough money to go on these trips and record things in person, live, bring it out to people. And, well, when he tells people that he made sacrifices of having a nice place to live and also having necessarily the nicest things, well, people don't want to make those sacrifices. So, coming back to the humility thing is, if you want a specific path, you gotta be willing to learn from the people who actually succeeded on that path, and also be willing to do the things that they did. They have wisdom that you could use. Don't be afraid to use it, and look for it too. So now number 6, and this is one I was beaten to my mind. Talent means largely nothing, and everything comes down to hard work. And you know what? That sounds derisive, but the reason I say it is, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you do nothing, if you put in zero work, you will go nowhere. And I've witnessed this with my own eyes, where that person who has no talent, no skills whatsoever, put in everything he had and built them from the ground up. They beat the people with all the talent. That's specifically, I guess I'll tell my story on this. I did Science Olympiad in high school, and my team comes from a poor high school. We're one of the poorest in LAUSD, and we went up against schools that had every resource possible, and we were still second, and we're still some like second or third best team in the state, and it's all through hard work that we put in every single day. Because you know what? We didn't have the resources. So we had to go look at it. We had to go to the library. I went every day to school to the Natural History Museum for an opportunity that I sought out for with the curator to actually learn geology from them. Because my school didn't have those resources. I needed to find them. But because of the work that we put in, and we were able to keep up with those people that had all the resources. And the funny thing, the reason why I put so much emphasis on the hard work, because my school was also the highly gifted magnet, the one with all the talent, supposedly. But if I noticed that if we didn't put the effort, we got like 20th place on the study events, on the build events, whatever. It was only when we gave it everything we had that we had a chance. Because there's always someone out there fighting harder than you. So what are you going to do then? To have a chance, you need to at least be willing to be on that same level with that same effort. So what are you going to do? And this last way, which could help you into withstanding the flood. Be willing to forgive. You know what? People mess up all the time. We make mistakes. We hurt others. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. But I do think it's a good thing for a chance of redemption. People improve. People can get better. And if you know someone who's honestly willing to make that chance, I think it's good to give them that opportunity. Who knows, maybe it's a family member, a friend, a lost love, your kid who you haven't talked to in a while, or reverse, your parent who was mean to you in many ways growing up, like my dad. But things could be made much... They might have way more to offer you than you realize. And I've learned that keeping resentment in your heart is never a good thing. It affects everything that you do. So, even though you may not be able to have a relationship with that person, I do think it's a good idea to be able to let go of the hatred you may have. And that just make you see, that just might help you see all the bright things that you have in life. So, those were my 7 ideas. I would make you into that person who could withstand a flood, just like Noah. And that ends up this whole segment 4 for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I had a lot of fun making this one. This one felt good. And we'll start making them more passionate like this one was. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys all in the next one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment below. I'd love to see your thoughts. And thank you for the GSMC Podcast Network again for doing this. Check out their other podcasts. We'll see you all in the next one. This is Steven Solorzano, signing off.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find the show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast.